Tuesday, Mr. Dan Rubenstein. How's the voice today? Is it better than it was on Saturday night?
It feels better. I don't know if it sounds better, but it feels better, and that's something.
Seems like it's at about 75%. You're not fully back yet, but it's better than it was when you sounded like Reese Davis on Saturday night.
I don't even think, did I sound as bad as Reese Davis did 21 hours into a shift? If I did, I apologize.
I feel like you kind of did. And It's not your fault. I'm just saying that was kind of the experience that we had for people here.
Well, it happens to all of college football's most notable speakers.
Welcome back, one. Welcome back, all. Thank you for joining us. This is the Tuesday Spillover episode. This is the episode where we get to talk about things that we didn't get a chance to talk about when we did the Saturday night at midnight recap of all things college football week 7. We also have a game of sorts, a topic that was suggested to us by our Verballers out at verballers.com, where you can sign up for bonus content and ad-free episodes and take part in our games and all sorts of fun stuff. Again, that is at verballers.com, Dan. We also have a new Verballer Top 12 poll, which we'll unveil here momentarily. Of course, if you are new, make sure you hit follow or subscribe. We'd love to keep you around. We do 3 episodes a week, trying our best to keep you up to speed on all things college football now, as we have, I guess, officially made it past the midway point in the season. And we get to start an exciting new chapter as we've made it through into middle of October.
It's always an exciting chapter with you, Ty. You know that.
I do. Any thoughts? Any thoughts in retrospect? Or I should say, how many thoughts do you have in retrospect? Looking back now on week 7. We're going to unveil the poll here momentarily, but I'm curious if you found it as easy as I did to just randomly identify like 75 things that we needed to discuss in this show.
Oh, it was super easy. Across the sport, it's super, especially you look ahead to schedules, you look at results from Saturday, Friday, Thursday, whatever, you look at the games that are coming up that immediately add intrigue, you look at the reactions, like Lane Kiffin reacting to the LSU game in such a human moment. I don't know if you saw his comments after losing the LSU game where he was like, man, losing by 2 touchdowns is one thing. Losing like this, man, that's... And he's just sort of like staring off into the nothingness. He was like, that's going to stay with me. And I appreciate, because that's how I think about losing games. And I have zero skin in any of these games personally. Like, I will not be fired from Solid Verbal Media Inc. if my favorite team wins or loses. Like, but to see him like react that way, I was like, man, I feel you, Lane. I really do feel you, because there are losses that we all have in our marrow from 6 years ago, 14 years ago, 27 years ago, whatever. And I appreciate him laying out that kind of honesty in front of the world.
Yeah, I have an Ole Miss item that I want to discuss with you.
Great.
A little bit later on in this podcast as we get into our leftover thoughts from week 7, because I think Ole Miss is an interesting topic for discussion right now. Where they stand, for sure, is something that we need to discuss here as we start looking at the SEC as a whole and really what it looks like moving forward after a lot of steam on the Rebels coming into this season. Why don't we start, though, with our Verballer Top 12 poll. We do have a new one that's out. We vote every week at verballers.com, and there have been some changes, as you might expect.
Yes.
This week, number 12, BYU, finally getting a little love. Number 11, LSU, by virtue of their win, moving up now into our Verballer Top 12. Number 10, Tennessee. Tennessee at 10, Dan.
Okay.
We have a 2-way tie. In 8th, we have Iowa State and Clemson, both tied with 737 points in our poll.
Okay.
At 7, we have Alabama. At 6, we have Miami. At 5, we have Georgia. At 4, we have Ohio State. After losing that Oregon game, dropped a couple spots. At 3, we have Penn State moving up. And then in a very, very tight race, we have Oregon at 2 and Texas at 1. Texas got the overwhelming majority of the first place votes, but nearly everybody else who voted in this poll had Oregon very high up. So because of that and because of the way we do the scoring for the poll points, this was a very, very close contest. Just about 100 points separate Texas from Oregon, which, again, by our measure here, is very, very tight. The drop-off that you see comes after number 6 with Miami. that's when it starts to become that mishmash that we've talked about now for a couple weeks running. When you get to Iowa State and Clemson and Tennessee and LSU and this is where people start to, I think, really have some differing opinions. I should also add the first 4 out or the next 4 in, however you want to categorize it.
Right.
Notre Dame would be 13th in this poll. Indiana would be 14th. Texas A&M, your Texas A&M Fighting Aggies would be 15th. Sir. And the Pitt Panthers would be number 16. I'll just throw another one in there because we are going to talk a little bit about the playoff. Boise State in this poll would be number 17 for what it's worth to you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great year for the BCS, right? Get Oregon, Texas, lock it in, right? There's the drop-off. That's what people want to see. Great. Let's do it. Let's go to the Rose Bowl. Let's settle this on the field. Okay, what are my thoughts here? There is a broader conversation as to why it feels like everybody's pretty flawed, except maybe for Texas, and we'll see it with Oregon right now. They seem to be in a good place. Penn State, winning is a skill. So, look, they're undefeated. It's very hard to go undefeated in a major conference, and they are that right now. But when you get to, I guess, depending on how you feel about Georgia's performance against Mississippi State, which was pretty uneven, especially that secondary took some hits. You get into that like Miami, Alabama range, and you're like, well, talented, but I don't know, surviving some weird games, losing in the case of Alabama in weird ways, or weird way. Iowa State, I don't know. I love Iowa State.
I'm really in on Iowa State. I've been in on Iowa State since the jump.
I'm both in on Iowa State, and also I have no concept of how Iowa State, and I'm still a doubter and a hater when I say this, how Rocco Becht is a quarterback who could beat any of the teams around Iowa State. Does that make any sense? We're like, I'm into them. I like them. I'm so impressed with what they did against West Virginia. But Rocco Becht throwing into like the Penn State defense feels disastrous to me still. And I need to be convinced. I need actual proof for me to believe.
Well, Iowa State is a team that I'm going to discuss here in a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Because I have deep Iowa State thoughts that I think we need to discuss here on this program. The one that jumped out to me was twofold. It was Bama. Right, Bama, I feel like, is this team that our Verballerhood has had trouble putting its finger on.
Yeah.
And obviously Ohio State, right? I posted it out on Twitter. I wanted to see how did people feel about dropping Ohio State? Where would you drop them? And I think outside of the jokesters who responded, most people agreed. They're obviously the kind of team that deserves to be in the top 5 based on what we saw this weekend. Mm-hmm. Losing to Oregon by 1 point on the road is a far cry from being a black eye.
Sure.
And so to see them drop to 4, it felt to me like our Verballerhood was very responsible in how they chose to handle the Buckeyes. BYU peaking in at number 12. Indiana was in this poll last week at 12. And again, because of that drop off and because the poll shifts a lot towards the bottom end of things, it's not surprising me that Indiana was not in this one because BYU had a resounding victory over Arizona, so they're deserving of that. I am doing my part to get past whatever skepticism I have with BYU, and I'm not doing a great job of it. I just went back through, looked at a bunch of numbers again before we hit record here. We could talk through a little bit of them as we go through this episode. However, I am pleased to see that they are at number 12. It is a nice, comfortable lead over Notre Dame, too. Right now, that could change, but BYU peeking its head in, has a pretty good resume thus far. I think they deserve to be there, whether or not you put them there or not.
I mean, look, when you look at BYU's resume, as I pull it up in front of me, it's beating SMU, aged well, although different SMU offense construction, obviously, but certainly that win has aged well.
Yep.
BYU beating Kansas State in resounding fashion, even if it wasn't just like the offense driving the field over and over and over again.
Killed them.
You beat a team 38-9. You beat a team 38-9.
They killed them. They absolutely murdered them.
Beating Baylor by double digits is a good thing.
Yep.
Baylor's at least feistier this year. And then beating Arizona and specifically turning Arizona over the way that they did, taking advantage of a deeply flawed and undisciplined Arizona team. and getting up to 40 points, 41-19.
41-19, yeah.
I mean, the results are there, even if the underlying numbers say, look, they're not an elite team. They're probably not going to go undefeated, but this is a strong bounce back year when people were questioning Kalani Sitake's job security.
It's been an incredible year. It's been an incredible, whether or not they win the conference or make the playoff or any of the headlining stuff that we talk about.
I'm just saying compared to the teams around them, like Notre Dame still lost to NIU, right?
Oh, yeah. No, compared to the teams around them, they deserve to be there. Yeah. And I think relative to preseason expectations, what they've done has been incredible.
I agree.
You remember I went on the air and I talked about, Kalani Sitake, everybody talks about how good of a coach he is. I think it's time for him to put up or shut up. I think he's putting up. Joke's on me.
Jake Retzloff, man.
Yeah, your boy. All right. So write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on this poll. We'll post it out on social media. Get your comments out there. We do have some breaking injury news, actually.
Okay.
Before we get into our leftover thoughts from week 7, of which there are many, 3 really significant bits of injury news just hit the wire here as we're recording on Monday afternoon. The first is that Cam Rising is out again, man. And for as much as we have made kind of the broad Cam Rising joke about the will he, won't he play, we don't want him to keep getting hurt.
No.
And he didn't look good when he came back this past weekend when Utah lost its game. And now we're finding out that he is out indefinitely due to a lower leg injury. Don't know what that means. Perhaps we'll hear more from Kyle Whittingham, but we wish Cam the best. I don't know what this means for his future. If he decides he wants to give it another go, he probably could get one.
Right. Another 8th year.
Another medical red shirt or something of that nature. But this is a bummer, certainly for Cam Rising, also for Utah fans who have been kind of in this lurch now for a while. The will he, won't he play thing has definitely worn a bit thin, and we just wish the team well, wish him well. That's a bummer. We've got news in South Bend. Benjamin Morrison, the All-American cornerback for the Irish, suffered a hip injury against Stanford. He needs surgery. He is done for the year. He still, I believe, is projected as a first-round pick. My hunch is that he will leave now as a result of this, not wanting to come back and do anything to damage his stock any further. But that is a significant blow for the Notre Dame defense, really a Notre Dame squad in its entirety that has had a ton of injuries that they are dealing with, not the least of which is along the defensive line, on the offensive line. Now you throw this in the mix. All things considered, the defense has played pretty well, and I think they're stocked fairly well in the secondary, but it's tough to replace a guy like Morrison, so he is done for the year. And then on top of it, we got another quarterback, Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz done for the year, tore his ACL in the game this weekend. It's going to be DJ Lagway's team from here on out. Graham Mertz posted a really nice, thoughtful message out to Gator Nation out on social media shortly before we hit record here, so I can imagine that was emotional for him. Whatever the problems have been for Florida over the last 2 years, Graham Mertz has not been the problem.
He's been pretty good.
Graham Mertz has been pretty good. I remember when they signed him to come down and be their transfer quarterback, a lot of us rolled our eyes, kind of eyebrows went up like, oh, that's the best they can do. Graham Mertz has been pretty good, and I feel like he's gotten better. So at this point, for him to now go down with a torn ACL, that's a huge bummer for him, for that program, for fans of the team.
Yeah, and hopefully the silver lining with DJ Lagway, who struggled somewhat against Tennessee, but obviously threw a crazy dime to tie that game, I believe, late against Tennessee.
Right.
He will get reps. The future will get plenty of reps, and hopefully Florida people, both fan-wise and administration-wise, are patient and understand that he's a true freshman and that, you know, for all of the terrific throws, there are going to be some duds, there are going to be some miscommunications, there are going to be, you know, some negative moments, but I don't know. There's no substitute for experience, and hopefully DJ Lagway is able to use this time to, you know, claw closer and closer to his ceiling, which I think is pretty damn high.
All right, time for leftovers from week 7. Again, we do the midnight recap episode. We can't get to everything.
Right.
That is the purpose of this segment. Today, Dan Rubenstein, as we were recording last week, Kansas State won 31-28 over Colorado. I hit that bet, by the way, that home dog of the week bet with Colorado plus 3.5.
Yeah.
K-State needed a late touchdown pass to Jace Brown to go ahead with about 2 minutes left. It is amazing to me at this point, and I guess I should not be surprised, but truly, it takes skill to do what Colorado did in this game. And by that, I mean offer absolutely zero threat of a rushing attack and still almost beat a really good team at home in K-State. They had a team total of negative 29 rushing yards if you factor in sacks. If you don't factor in sacks, they had 10 carries for 21 yards.
Ooh, that's totally different. Yeah.
Totally different. So the fact that they're putting it all on Shedeur with their offense, that they came this close to winning, is damn. Now, they also lost Travis Hunter. He got hurt with a shoulder injury in this game as well.
Yep.
I think they lost Jimmy Horn Jr. as well. They're dealing with injuries. At least they were in this game out wide. But for them to kind of take K-State to the wire without having truly one whole dimension of their offense is damn impressive to me. So good win for K-State on the road.
I thought you were going to say for Colorado to get this close without having safeties.
Well, that too.
Yeah. It was a really impressive win from K-State. It was really impressive from, again, the one-man performance from Shedeur Sanders, or the one aspect performance this passing game. That quick release came up big in big spots. And to me, it was just, and I think it was Avery Johnson went down at a certain point and came back in this one. So it was a gutty win from Kansas State, getting he was interfered with, right? Jace Brown at the end of the game, but still came down with the catch and scored. That a gutty win for Kansas State on the road in a tough place to win. So yeah, really fun rewatch as it was unfolding during our Saturday night reaction show. And if nothing else, it also underscores the fact that Colorado is going to win more games.
Yes.
This year.
Colorado's going to be a bowl team.
They're going to be a bowl team.
They're going to go to a bowl, and I think that's real progress.
Yeah.
So I give them props for definitely being better this season and correcting some notable issues that we saw a year ago, notably defense. Defense is a problem.
Colorado, by the way.
They're better.
Colorado coming up. A flawed Arizona team, a decent but still pretty flawed Cincinnati team, a decent but somewhat flawed Texas Tech team, a Utah team with no Cam Rising, a Kansas team that has fallen off or completely fallen off, an Oklahoma State team who is reeling. So, a lot of meat left on that Colorado scheduling bone.
For sure. What else do you have here?
Oh, my God.
In terms of leftover thoughts from week 7. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 big ones on my list. I suspect you have many more.
Also unfolding as we were beginning this show, Iowa State, West Virginia. I did not watch a ton of this as it was happening and came away so impressed with Iowa State. West Virginia came out, kind of punched him in the mouth, drove down, scored early, and Iowa State was patient. They did a decent enough job, even with Garrett Green getting loose for a few runs, that they kept that rushing attack down so well, Iowa State. And just, I don't know, they're a multi-phase team that they're able to react to what teams are trying to do quickly. They pick up on what teams are doing quickly. And then with what they were able to do going downfield, that was the big thing for a stretch of time with Iowa State, was that they were trying to play pickleball every week. They were trying to just sort of possess and play defense. I don't know, when you have Noel, when you have Higgins, like, there's a fearlessness downfield. I'm not talking about bombing it downfield, but I'm talking about like over the heads of linebackers, wheel routes, like taking shots. And Iowa State is keeping defenses honest. Like, this is a legit, really good team, because I really felt strongly. I'm not just saying they're good because I doubted them and they proved me wrong specifically.
Sure.
But like, that's a tough spot to go to Morgantown on the road, given the situation. Like, this is still a good West Virginia offense most of the time. And I thought that was a losable moment that I think they're up 28-10 with like a minute left or something like that. And West Virginia scored late. They left no doubt here to me. And so I came away super impressed upon not even a rewatch, just a watch of that. I don't know if you have any Iowa State thoughts.
Well, I have many, and not to give away the game too much, but the segment that our Verballerhood wanted us to go back through and talk more about was a revised playoff bracket.
Right.
Now that we're halfway through the season, how does it change our initial thoughts? I went very deep with this, okay? Very deep with this. I did look a lot at the Big 12 because the Big 12 feels like it's almost anyone's at this point.
Yeah.
Right now, Iowa State has a 41% chance per ESPN
Okay.
of winning the Big 12 and a 54% chance of making the playoff. Their win out percentage, just 8.1%. So Vegas, not or ESPN, Vegas, whoever does the numbers.
It's just hard to go undefeated. Yeah.
Hard to go undefeated, not as confident in that. But at least with their standing in the Big 12, they feel the numbers do pretty confident in Iowa State. So I'm with you on that front. I did go back and look a little bit deeper at some of the new teams in the Big Ten this year.
Big 10 or Big 12?
I want to shift to the Big Ten.
Oh, okay.
I think UCLA is going to finish 2-10 or maybe 1-11.
They might be 1-11. Yep.
And I'm wondering if we see a coaching change as a result of that. I don't know what the state of USC athletics is. I know part of their rationale for leaving and wanting to join the Big Ten was so that they could get an influx of cash.
UCLA, you mean? Yeah. You said
UCLA.
USC. Yeah.
But this team has effectively taken a nosedive on offense. And they have not scored more than 17 points in any game this season. Deshaun Foster does not really instill much confidence in me at this point. It just feels like even if we expected a bit of a drop-off after Chip went to Ohio State, this is extraordinarily drastic. And maybe not something a lot of people saw coming. Very disappointing to see this version of UCLA out there. I keep saying USC, forgive me.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what the status is of that program. I remember when he was hired asking Bruce Feldman, is this just going to be a 1-year sort of interim type situation before they can find somebody else to come in there?
Right.
And I don't think that was his answer. I don't think he necessarily...
No, Bruce said he didn't think so. Yeah.
He didn't agree with that sentiment, but if they finish 1-11, Dan, with a win in week 1 by 3 points over Hawaii, I can't imagine there's much appetite for that.
No, of course not. And I mean, look, the UCLA job is an especially difficult one for a number of reasons. And, you know, I think Chip Kelly and the money behind the scenes were probably on different pages, to be kind.
Yeah.
And so that was not a long-term solution, even if Chip seemed to have them kind of reaching their ceiling as an 8-4, 9-3 type program at their best. And that's in a different conference, of course. But look, what can you point to right now with Deshaun Foster to sort of keep him around? He's not expensive, so it's not like you're on the hook for a ton of money. He's not going gangbusters in recruiting, as far as I can tell. And so you're like, well, we can't get rid of him quickly. You know, we got to give him time to see what he can do with this like crazy impressive recruiting class. He doesn't have a history at UCLA in terms of a head coaching history to lean back on and be like, yes, it's a down year. But like, you know, you look at somebody like Dave Aranda. Like Dave Aranda won the conference.
Yeah.
Kalani Sitake has had success here. So there's a little bit of benefit of the doubt to say like, you know what, let's give this guy a shot to get back to where he has had this program before. Also, though, like 1 year is such a short amount of time, especially given the timing of when he took over to give a head coach, especially one who you have to have every belief, like wants to win at UCLA, played at UCLA, was a star at UCLA, is a big believer in UCLA. Like it would be ideal if Deshaun Foster got it figured out in the medium term. But there has to be at least morsels, you know, to look at and say like, oh, I see, you know, you squint and you're like, well, I can see how the offense is picking it up.
You see the vision. You see where it's headed.
The recruiting machine is ramping up. You're just like, I don't know, man. I really hate the idea of firing a coach after 1 year, truly, especially given the circumstances he came in under. But this is not a team that looks prepared to compete for 4 quarters. Like, did it for a couple quarters at LSU, didn't score a single point in the second half. And there's like that ongoing trend with UCLA. Just they're not built to, they're not coached to. That doesn't seem like they have the vision to compete for 4 quarters, no matter the level of opponent. And that's hard to see changing, but I don't know. I'm still a believer that unless it's so obvious behind the scenes that he's so in over his head, and that if that's the case, you got to move on. You just have to move on.
Yeah.
If a coach is if this level is not for the coach in this moment in his career, you got to move on.
That got me to thinking more broadly about the coaching carousel.
Okay.
USA did it again. UCLA is the obvious thought.
Uh-huh.
I still have questions about Florida. I expect that they will move on from Billy Napier. Don't know. Don't know, especially now with Graham Mertz coming down with that injury, if starting the freshman is going to give him something of a stay of execution.
Who are their next three? Who's Florida's next three?
I don't have it in front of me. I'll pull it up, but I know that Florida's schedule on a whole was notably brutal coming into the season. The rest of the way here, oh no, Dan.
The next three, look, beatable Kentucky at home.
Yeah, but then, go ahead.
Georgia at Texas are their next three. Kentucky, Georgia, Texas.
Keep
Texas
going. Then home against LSU, home against Ole Miss.
And Florida State.
Winnable
Florida State.
Right now projected to beat Kentucky, but lose 4 in a row to those 4 big dogs.
Which would put them at what?
That would put them at 5-7.
I don't know. LSU's defense, I mean, look, they're right there with Tennessee. So if you're saying Florida is Tennessee-ish at their best on the road, right?
I still think they're going to move on, but we'll see. That's one to consider.
Yeah.
I think Aranda's done at Baylor.
Okay.
I think Sam Pittman may be done. Wouldn't surprise me, but
okay.
Better vibes. Wouldn't surprise me if Mac Brown walks away, given the season that North Carolina's having. It might be the best thing for him. Ryan Walters at Purdue, that's been a disaster. Brent Pry has been a disaster this year at Virginia Tech. Hugh Freeze has been something of a disaster at Auburn. Starting to wonder about Sonny Dykes at TCU. I'm up to 8 here as I'm counting out.
Yeah.
That's not even to mention what's going on at Kentucky with Mark Stoops, which feels like bad vibes. And his buyout, by the way, I checked, is only $4 million. They decided they wanted to go a different direction there, or whatever it's worth to you. I don't expect that they would pay $88 million to buy out Lincoln Riley, but there aren't great vibes right now at USC either.
Right.
10 names right there. 10 names just kind of off the top of my head. As
you don't suspect USC is going to pay $88 million to get rid of Lincoln Riley? Yeah, they're not paying $88 million.
I don't think they're going to, but there's 10 names for you. There's 10 names if we start thinking broadly about the coaching carousel, maybe more, maybe I left somebody off, that I think make this a very, very active cycle eventually once we get there. And we haven't seen a coach get fired yet, despite some of the preseason chatter that we had, whether it's going to be Napier or Pittman or somebody else. We haven't seen anybody pull the ripcord yet. It's kind of interesting in its own right.
Okay. I'm interested about, I don't know, talking a little bit further about Sam Pittman and Arkansas. Right now they're at 4-2, right?
Yep.
Could easily be at 5-1, which is not necessarily a good thing in Pittman's favor, given the way they lost the Oklahoma State game. But they've got a bunch of flawed teams on this schedule too.
I like them. I don't want them to fire Sam Pittman. I really don't. But talk about flaws. Okay, the 2 flawed teams that they've got on the schedule are Mississippi State and Louisiana Tech, who's not an SEC team. But outside of those 2, they've got LSU, they've got Ole Miss, they've got Texas, and they've got Mizzou.
Right, but they have the back end of LSU, LSU's defense.
Yeah.
And that's LSU in a letdown spot, right? This coming week, Arkansas coming off a bye.
Yep.
Situationally, that's not too bad for Arkansas. We've all watched Arkansas LSU games. We all saw, Arkansas's groundskeeper leave the sprinklers on in freezing temperatures and ice the field.
Yeah.
There's just, that game is always strange. It's always strange. And that game is in Fayetteville at night this coming week, yes?
Correct.
Mississippi State on the road. It's still going to be difficult. Their offense seems to be getting to a nice place. They're starting, was it Van Buren? Michael Van Buren?
Michael Van Buren.
One-time Oregon and Penn State commit, I think.
Correct.
At quarterback, and he's shown some spunk. Texas is not flawed.
No.
Ole Miss, we'll see. That game is in Fayetteville once again. At Mizzou is going to be difficult, but we're not talking about a Mizzou team that has appeared to be as bulletproof, I'll speak for myself, as I thought they'd be heading into the season. I'm just saying Arkansas can be just the fly in the ointment across the board this year.
And I said maybe.
I know.
Maybe. And
this was not a definitive term from you. Yeah.
And look, as it stands right now, you beat Mississippi State and Louisiana Tech, 2 teams you should beat, you're going to a bowl.
Yep.
Compared to where we thought Arkansas would be at this point in time, halfway through the season, when truly we thought Sam Pittman might already be fired, that's progress. That's real progress.
Yeah.
You know I like Taylor Green, right? Don't get me going on Taylor Green. I could do a full hour on Taylor Green.
LSU has gotten better against the run, to be clear, and that might be a bad thing for Arkansas.
Might be a bad thing, and they could lose 4 of these 6 games and still finish 6-6. Going to a bowl, I don't think they should, but I also don't know the state of play at Arkansas and what their expectations are for this program moving forward.
Yeah.
I want to believe that seeing somebody like a Taylor Green out there has given them some hope and promise that Sam Pittman still has an eye for talent. I do think this is a better team on the whole. And you're right, there are some flawed teams, but if they drop one of these, what appear to be mulligans, that's a problem for them. I think if they miss a bowl, then I could see them maybe making a move.
I also don't think Arkansas behind the scenes is going to be all too thrilled with only 6-6 to as like
no,
proof
I don't think
that
so
things
either.
are better once again.
No, especially now knowing that they're willing to go out there and spend to get John Calipari on the basketball side.
Right.
Clearly, they've got expectations for the athletic program, and I don't know if 6-6 is good enough. So that's just at least something to keep an eye on. That's why I said maybe. Maybe.
Things are about to go wild in the American. I have that down as things that I've sort of recently discovered more thoroughly, just with what Tulane and Memphis and Navy and Charlotte and North Texas have coming up, that there is a roster of teams. I don't know. There's a grouping of teams at or near the top of the American, and less so. I think it's Navy who has Tulane. Army does not. They both have Notre Dame. Army and Navy do, but only Navy has Tulane.
Right.
It's about to get very incestuous within the American scheduling wise. Everybody's playing everybody, and it's about to get very fun. And there will be more sense made coming up in the American, but it's about to get very fun this back half of October in the AAC.
What else you got for me?
If Wazoo doesn't go 11-1, it'd be kind of surprising. Have you seen Wazoo's schedule in this moment?
Yes.
Wazoo is on, and now look, they don't have a conference to win and get into the playoff in that sense. They can get in as an at-large team, yes.
They could.
They can get in as an at-large 11-1 team, but really needed that Boise win, really needed to go undefeated to have the best possible shot. But with what their schedule looks like in the back end, I don't believe they have UNLV, right?
No, it's Hawaii at San Diego State, home against Utah State, at New Mexico, at Oregon State. That's really the big one that remains on the schedule. And then they close out the year at home against Wyoming. By this measure here, they are at least a 2-touchdown favorite in every game with the exception of that Oregon State game, which right now figures to be about a pick 'em.
And that's an Oregon State team who just lost at Nevada and is down like 5-6 defensive linemen in this moment to injury.
Correct.
They are extremely thin on defense right now, which is not great when you look at what Washington State has been able to do on the ground.
About a 77% chance of winning at least 10 games for Wazoo, which, look, totally separate from everything and where it fits into the broader discussion. Right. It's a nice effort for Washington State to get a season like this after all the turmoil from a year ago.
So and lost their quarterback. Lost their quarterback to Miami. Yeah.
Yep. John Mateer. We're all material girls. You know that.
We're all material girls. Louisiana school, we mentioned LSU, but like both Louisiana and Monroe are having like quietly really nice years. And I think it's worth monitoring Sunbelt wise. What else do I have down here on the LegalZoom legal pad? Purdue, Illinois. That second half was maybe the most entertaining half of football for people who don't necessarily need defense in their lives. Illinois blew a lead. 2 quick touchdowns for Purdue. Purdue was throwing the ball super well. Devin Mockabee both running the ball and out of the backfield as a pass catcher. Scored 40 second half points. And the actual passing game for Purdue looked real. And it likely has something to do with Hudson Card no longer being the starting quarterback and Graham Harrell no longer being employed as the offensive coordinator, that they're just sort of in effort mode.
Yeah.
Oregon has Purdue this week.
Uh-oh.
Short week on the road. I'm just telling you, Purdue does not have a defense. The talent level of Purdue is not anywhere near what Oregon's is. But what's Purdue's nickname as like an identity within the Big Ten? Are they not the spoiler makers?
They are the spoiler makers, yeah.
Oregon's coming off of a historic, monumental, program-defining win and now has to travel to West Lafayette on short rest. I don't believe Lafayette is going to win this game. We'll get into this in the preview more, but this sort of struck me watching the game that like this team does not give a flock, Ty.
Yeah.
This team does not care. And they lost the game to Illinois. Luke Altmaier looked very good. The passing game for Illinois looked really good. But situationally, I saw Oregon was favored by like 4 touchdowns. I think Oregon might be throwing a bunch of second stringers into this game. Let's go win by 10-13 and move on, because not ideal a time to play a team who just does not care if you're Oregon.
If I'm an Ole Miss fan right now, I feel like I'm stuck inside that Spider-Man meme where he's pointing at himself.
Okay.
On one side, you've got the 2024 version of Ole Miss. On the other, you've got him pointing back at pretty much every previous version of Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like an identical team pointing back at itself at this point. And I can only imagine how frustrating that must be after all of the hype coming into this year, after we looked at the schedule and looked at the roster and felt like this was finally going to be it for Ole Miss. We talked, as you may recall, a lot about how Ole Miss had a lot in common with the Tennessees and the Penn States and maybe the Utahs of the world. These teams that have been very good, but because the system before wasn't big enough to allow more teams into the playoff, they just never really had a shot. You'd lose 1, you'd lose 2, you were done.
Mm-hmm.
Here we stand now, midway through the season, and it feels like Ole Miss is out of this thing already. It feels like they're out of it. To your point from earlier with Lane Kiffin sort of having this
gutted.
human moment in reaction to the loss. I would welcome feedback from our verballerhood out there that cheers for Ole Miss. And we got a couple calls about it, but I'd like to hear more about how you're feeling right now. And I saw our friends at Message Board Geniuses were having a little bit of fun with this, as some people out on the Ole Miss message board were saying it's time to move on past Lane Kiffin. And I think this is when you see some of the crazies come out and some of the crazy talk come out in response to another loss. But frustrating. I don't know. Extraordinarily frustrating to know all this talent is assembled and ready to go, and still it feels like you're back at square one.
I agree. I'll stay in the SEC briefly. I rewatched Vanderbilt, Kentucky. One, I'm pretty sure they have 2 head coaches. I'm pretty sure Clark Lee is just coaching the defense, and Jerry Kill and Tim Beck are coaching the offense, and maybe the high-level decisions are being made by Clark Lee about timeouts and whether to go for it on 3rd or 4th or something like that. Maybe even not. I was watching that, and I was like, okay, they built the whole plane out of Diego Pavia, and he's incredible, and he is improvising, and he is coming up with play after play. What does a post-Diego Pavia Vanderbilt look like? Like, have they already started scouting, like, the G5 quarterback that they feel like they can throw money? Like, they should be constantly in this cycle.
Are they going to go hard at Sluka?
I was going to say Haj Malik Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Sluka's backup.
Just hollow out UNLV, man.
But it does feel like, yes, a Sluka type. Somebody who is just making play after play. I love it. I don't know how sustainable this model is.
Yeah.
But Vandy's going to be... Look, first of all, we made a big deal out of the Vandy offense. Obviously, had the strip sack against Alabama, which essentially sealed it. The defense played so well against Kentucky. This Kentucky offense is broken. They have too many players to be this flawed on offense.
Yeah.
Like, the receivers are too good. Like, they just have too much talent to be on. I don't know if it's a Bush Hamden thing. I don't know if it's a quarterback thing. Whatever it is. Vanderbilt is just squeezing every drop out of this roster, and it's quite fun to watch.
It is fun to watch. Did you happen to see Mark Stoops' reaction to this? There was some weird, bizarre NIL-related comment associated with it.
Okay.
Kind of akin to what we saw a year ago when he urged Kentucky fans, if they are unsatisfied, they need to donate more to the NIL. And he sort of had a circuitous way of taking Diego Pavia and his success with bringing him to Vanderbilt, and then linked it back to how Kentucky fans need to go harder at NIL. Strange construction for me.
Didn't they go grab Georgia's backup quarterback who was a 5-star?
Even stranger construction for him. Whenever you start hearing kind of like complaints and excuses and some of this blame storming, that's why I start looking up buyout figures.
Right.
And start wondering, okay, is this a long-term relationship at this point? It's been very successful at Kentucky.
I mean, he tried to leave for the Texas A&M job. It seemed like he was going to. That worked out really well for Texas A&M because right now Mark Stoops, for as much success as he's had at a program that's not necessarily known for high-level success in their conference playing football, he's like 1 for 6 on offensive coordinators. Yep. And he tried that one twice in Liam Cohen. Yep. And so for whatever reason, I don't know if he can't get out of his own way in terms of offensive vision, or he just does not have an eye for offensive coordinator talent, or he's doing something internally that year after year, other than that 1 year of Will Levis and Liam Cohen, they're just like, man, Kentucky just can't even accidentally step into a fun offense. It's just puddle after puddle, and it sucks they're wasting this defense. I can say that. I'm sure Kentucky fans are feeling the same way. But yeah, watching that game, you're like, man, what is the plan here on offense?
If you're North Carolina, if you're Auburn, would you have interest in Mark Stoops?
North Carolina or Auburn? Auburn's not getting rid of their coach, I don't think.
I don't know. Hugh Freeze is making a lot of excuses. It seems like vibes are bad. I don't expect them making a move, but
recruiting vibes are very high at all.
Recruiting vibes are very high.
Yeah. They're not making a move. Would I be interested in Mark Stoops if I were North Carolina? Probably.
He's a name that comes up all the time. People cite the success he's had at Kentucky. There has been an ongoing discussion as to whether he has hit his ceiling at Kentucky for a multitude of reasons we won't go into here. If there were to be any kind of coaching change and Mark Stoops is on the market, I'm just curious to see who'd be interested in those services.
I mean, if the coaching change comes because Kentucky loses like their final 7 games or something, his name's not going to be as hot. That's just the reality. Maybe he'll take a year off and do some TV and then coach. I don't know. Yeah, he has at Kentucky won enough games in a difficult conference to warrant his name being valuable. And so, yeah, whether it's a place like North Carolina, somewhere in the relative regional vicinity, yes, I could see it being attractive.
Any other thoughts before we get to my revised playoff bracket?
No. Just, I mean, there's a number of those. I mentioned the American thing. You know, North Texas hasn't lost there. I think those are my thoughts. I mean, I do have 37 more Oregon thoughts. If you want to get into Oregon, Ohio State. Here's my final thought, and this will serve as a nice transition.
Yeah.
To your next segment. That as an Oregon fan, it felt great. It was a very fun experience for me. After the game ended, it was not fun on that last drive, wondering if Oregon was going to be able to get that stop. But as I've distanced myself from the game, right, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I've seen like playoff projections, like I'm sure what you're about to unleash to the world,
unfetter.
There's just a lot of like, yeah, Ohio State's still going to win the Big Ten, like kind of reactions where you're just like, oh, so Oregon fans get to enjoy this for about 48 hours. And, you know, we have all these Ohio State people just absolutely losing their mind for 48 hours. They're in like the loser jacuzzi. The losey jacuzzi? I don't know. But in this new beautiful system, you know, in Ty Hildenbrandt's America, a big win lasts for 24 hours.
That's right.
And then you're just like, oh, it doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter because they're going to play again, or Ohio State's going to be fine, and they're going to win the conference. They're going to get a bye. So it was cute that all of you Oregon people thought it was a fun, amazing experience, but ultimately, it's not going to mean a damn thing. That's Ty Hildenbrandt's America, everybody.
Yeah, I have Oregon losing to Ohio State in the rematch. I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah, that resounding 1-point win. It was it was special. I enjoyed watching it.
Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti's America as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The implication here that Oregon dominated Ohio State in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, they didn't dominate. I mean,
damn well Ohio State could beat them the next time they play, if they play.
Right. And look, maybe they'll review an obvious interception next time. That's fine. You know, that's one of those things. There will be more attention because, you know, you can get away with nobody watching a huge game on network TV. I think there's a case to be made that Oregon should have won by more points, and they left more points on the field than Ohio State did. And maybe next time Ohio State dodges a kick that's kicked right at the spleen of a player. Yeah.
Do you think Oregon's 5'10" quarterback will still be upright by the time they get to that rematch in the Big Ten championship?
I mean, the best defensive line they played didn't touch him, right? Should we count the sacks Ohio State had? Okay, here we go. I'm going to review the play-by-play. Oh, it's none, Ty. It's none sacks that Ohio State's 5-star line had against Oregon's 5'10" quarterback, who also had a 30-yard touchdown run, right?
That's correct.
And how much money did that 5'10" quarterback lose Denzel Burke on Saturday night? Oh, no, he was always like second, third round-ish. Oh, no.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Seems like 5'10" might be the move. If a 5'10" quarterback is out here losing all these 5-stars money.
All right, let's do some projections here. So what we do in this middle segment, we talk through a topic that is suggested to us by the Verballer Hood. This one came to us from Daniel, a premium Verballer. Again, verballers.com. Go and check out our perks. Who says it's mid-season. We're halfway through. It would be cool to see revised playoff brackets.
Agree to disagree. Continue.
I went very deep with this.
I know.
Very deep with this. I have a full revised field of 12. I went all the way through, looked at individual conference tiebreakers, you name it. This is about as informed a projection as I can give you at this point through 7 weeks of the year. So if you can indulge me here for a few minutes, I can go through this thing. For those watching the video at the end, I've got the bracket drawn up that I can flash up on the screen.
Floor is yours.
First things first, Notre Dame is getting in.
Okay.
Notre Dame is getting in. Some people out there are ironclad on them getting in. I am not in that camp. All right. I'm not worried about the games against Army and Navy. I am a little worried this weekend against Georgia Tech away from home. I am certainly still worried about that USC game. It's a rivalry. I don't know where USC will be. We can talk till we're blue in the face about USC's not a good team. That's what you said before the game last week. USC almost beat Penn State. Maybe Penn State's flawed too. Definitely a real chance of that.
Penn State, even getting rid of the Hail Mary interception, Penn State did plenty to try and lose that game to USC.
Oh, yeah. So there's definitely a bigger discussion about, everybody feels like they're kind of the same, or everybody feels like they've got a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is no different in that sense. I am not counting that USC game as a definite win. It's not one that I'm looking at and saying, I feel totally confident with that one.
Right.
But at time of recording, I think Notre Dame gets in, finishing up its year 11-1.
How's Notre Dame's defensive line?
Notre Dame's defensive line, all things considered, has still been pretty good. But
then they're going to destroy USC up front.
Okay, all right.
Did you see what Abdul Carter was able to do from lining up in the middle of that defensive line on, was it 3rd and 13? There was some crucial 3rd or 4th down late in that game, and he had one-on-one with USC center who kind of barely touched him. Notre Dame rushed 4. USC kept in 5 and a running back to chip, and Miller Moss had a millisecond. He had what a supercomputer can calculate in terms of time.
Yeah.
He had so little time that it would take something in Stockholm, a computer that's taking up a room in Stockholm, to calculate how much time Miller Moss had on that play with a 4-man rush. Continue.
In the Big Ten, regarding the playoff discussion, I think the Big Ten is the least interesting power conference.
Okay.
I do think the order of teams will be interesting, but I think compared to the SEC, compared to the Big 12, compared to the ACC, even compared to the G5, Big Ten is the least interesting conference. There are 3 teams getting in. Those 3 teams are going to be Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. I realize this is the point in the conversation where we need to talk about Indiana.
Of course it is.
Okay. Indiana, great story, 6-0. The best team they have played to date is Maryland,
who just got destroyed by Northwestern.
Destroyed, 37-10.
Yeah.
Indiana is getting into the stretch of their schedule now where things are going to get real. They've got Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, and Michigan. They also go to Ohio State in late November. I like this team a lot, Dan. I do. I love Curt Cignetti. I like the story more than I like the team, though. I personally hope they go 12-0. I hope they win the damn national championship. Good for them. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I will believe it when I see it. I think this is like a 10-2, 9-3 team, which in its own right is a great deal for Curt Cignetti, a great deal for this program. But let's be real about this, okay?
Okay.
Indiana's not getting in the playoff. I also don't think Iowa's getting in the playoff. I think Iowa's going to win out. I think they're going to finish 10-2. I think they need a lot of help to get into the Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a postseason story that we take and run with. They might beat somebody in the bowl game, or they might get shut out like they did a year ago.
The plus for Iowa right now is their loss to Iowa State. Iowa State needing, a 50-plus yard field goal to win that?
Yeah, it's a better loss than it looks.
One of the more defensible losses in America
Absolutely.
right now. If that's important to you, if that's important to Greg Sankey, whoever's actually deciding the playoff. Yeah.
But they're not getting in that Big Ten title game. They would need a ton of help. So Iowa's out to me. Michigan's out to me. All right. I think they've got at least 2 more losses in them. I don't trust them against Illinois. And it feels to me like every time I try to go through it and work out the math, it's coming down to those 3 teams that I mentioned at the top. The bigger question to me is this. If Penn State goes into that game on November 2nd against Ohio State, is there a chance that Penn State could knock Ohio State out of this conversation entirely?
With a second loss?
With a second loss. James Franklin does not win this game. Historically, against Ohio State.
Unless they're blocking a miracle field goal at the end? Yeah.
Historically, this is not a game he wins. It has been a source of obvious frustration in the Penn State community.
Yeah.
But I don't know the answer to it, but I think it's worth having that conversation as for whether or not a second loss for Ohio State, losing to what would be 2 playoff teams, essentially.
Right.
Is that enough to keep them out of the conversation? That's going to be a big one on November the 2nd. That being said, I've got Ohio State winning the conference.
Okay.
I've got them beating Oregon in a rematch in Indy. I've got Oregon as an at-large. I've got Penn State as an at-large. Essentially 3 one-loss teams coming out of the Big Ten. Those are 4 now, if you factor in Notre Dame, okay? 4 teams I've got in my updated bracket.
So you only have the Big Ten getting 3 in?
3 teams. 3 teams from the Big Ten.
So if Indiana goes 10-2...
They're out.
And
no.
You think 10-2 Indiana only losing to what? Ohio State and Michigan or something?
They're out.
Well, so you're at that point you're comparing 10-2 Indiana against other 10-2 programs across America.
Yep.
And the thing you probably have to knock Indiana for is scheduling? It's the non-conference portion of their schedule?
It's the non-conference portion of the schedule, and who have you beaten?
FIU, Western Illinois, Charlotte, who's decent this year.
Yeah.
They've taken care of business. They have an opportunity. The problem is, road-wise, it's at Michigan State, which right now I think they're 2-touchdown. It is the projection right now. The SP Plus is a 2-touchdown favorite. Michigan, they're favored to win, but that's going to be very difficult still.
I'm not buying that. I'm just not buying that.
I mean, Michigan lost to
Washington. I know, but I'm not. I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah,
again,
the Ohio State thing is.
I love the Indiana story more than I like the team.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm wrong. I do. I'm not here to take a dump on Indiana or anything. But if I'm being real with you guys, this is where I feel. This is how I feel about the Big Ten.
Do you think Penn State would have a shot against Ohio State at home?
Do I think
as you say, James Franklin doesn't win this game?
Oh, I think they'll have a shot. I do think they'll have a shot. I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a better game than it was last year.
I don't.
But I don't think they're going to win the game.
I think Ohio State is still if Ohio State is USC-ish, if they need to come back and go to overtime, I think Penn State is a full stop.
No, I agree. Although
Ohio State,
let's be real. Ohio State did lose to a 5'10" quarterback, so who knows what's possible.
Everybody that the 5'10" quarterback has played this year has lost.
Who knows
and
what's
honestly,
possible.
I was more scared of Idaho than Ohio State at the end of that game. Continue.
All right, the ACC. The ACC is interesting. All right, it is interesting. I have Clemson now winning the conference.
Okay.
And I have them winning over SMU.
In the championship game, okay.
In the championship game. I have Miami making it as an at-large. So I am not sure how many people have looked at this to see how it is setting up. But there is an awful lot coming down to a game on November 2nd. It is not the game we're going to be at, Michigan against Oregon. It is not the other big one in the Big Ten, which is Penn State, Ohio State. It is a game between Pitt and SMU. Because right now, Pitt is 6-0, SMU is 5-1. Still unbeaten in conference. That one loss was against SMU, right? Or was against BYU, excuse me.
BYU, yep.
And my acronyms mixed up here. There is a good chance that the winner of that game has an inside track into the ACC title game should Miami stumble.
Yeah.
And I do think Miami is going to stumble because we have seen some hints of this along the way the last couple weeks. Miami has 3 road games left against Louisville this week. It's only about a 3-point line. They've got Georgia Tech on the road. They've got Syracuse on the road to close out the season. I would be surprised if they don't dump one of those games.
Okay.
So I got them losing one of those games, and I think SMU gets to the title game by virtue of beating Pitt, essentially finishing 10-2 with one conference loss in the title game.
Right. Okay. And I mean, the logic is sound with Miami getting into because they scheduled and beat Florida on the road.
Yep.
Which, again, if you're comparing resumes against Indiana, if Indiana's 10-2 and Miami's 10-2, I don't know if there's specific connective tissue between Miami and Indiana.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to start looking at, right? Teams that don't make conference championship game, you got to start looking at non-conference, and I think you have to start looking at magnitude and where those wins occurred. Yep.
I think that would get SMU to 11-2. Maybe I'm botching the math a little bit here. I think Pitt loses to SMU. I also think they drop to Clemson. Maybe someone else once that air is out of the balloon. You know how
do you have SMU in at 11-2?
I have SMU in the ACC title game.
Do you have them in the playoff at 11-2?
No, I don't. So I've got SMU going to the title game as an 11-1 team. I've got them losing to Clemson in that game, probably in resounding fashion.
Yeah.
And then I've got Miami sneaking back in as an 11-1 team, as an at-large.
Okay.
I'd also add Syracuse is interesting. I don't think the defense is sustainable. No. I think Louisville is interesting in theory, but they've still got Miami, Clemson, and Pitt on the schedule.
Out of Louisville. Yeah.
They also play BC on the road. They close out the year against Kentucky. There's just like too much that can go wrong with that schedule.
I'm out on your perception that SMU is going to be 11-1 heading into and make the conference championship game, just because traveling to California, which is not terrible, obviously, from Dallas, but at Stanford and at Duke back to back. Okay. So different sides of the country in back-to-back weeks. And then the Duke defense, I don't know. I just think Manny Diaz is going to be ready. And then Pitt at home, which, look, Pitt is pretty good, but they're not a 6-0 team at 6-0.
No.
And that's okay. That's way better than being 4-2. It's way better than being 2-4.
That Pitt SMU game is going to have so much riding on it. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a lot of points.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a big-time shootout. I think SMU wins. They're at home in that game. I think it's set up well for them. I think the schedule is set up fairly well for them, and it feels like they have gotten better. It feels like they've now got some momentum after making their own quarterback change. I don't feel great about that pick. For as much as I like to talk about SMU, I'm not going to act like I feel super confident there. But I'm just looking at that Miami schedule, and I'm seeing landmine after landmine after landmine. I don't see them making it the full way through.
But you don't see landmine after landmine for SMU? Finishing with Boston College, at Virginia, and Cal?
I just think the teams on Miami's schedule and those situations, they weird me out a little bit. So
I mean, also Mario Cristobal's coaching history should play a factor.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I do have Miami getting in, but as an at-large, I have Clemson winning the conference over SMU.
Okay, fair enough.
And then in the SEC, I think I got 4 teams in.
Hold on, I'm bringing up Clemson's schedule. I appreciate the confidence, but Clemson has not looked incredible all the time, even though some of the scoreboards
look at Clemson's schedule. Before we move on to the SEC, look at Clemson's schedule and tell me where I'm wrong.
Virginia, they should be able to beat relative, even with like the defense looking a little bit more suspect than I expected. Louisville, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt. I don't know. I feel like they're going to drop something. It doesn't mean they're not making the conference championship game. I think they're going to drop something.
Fair enough.
Continue.
SEC gets 4 teams in.
Okay.
Unless you're thinking that Vandy's going to take down Texas, in addition to Alabama in the same season.
Buddy, I assume nothing with Vandy.
I think Texas makes it through unbeaten. I think they make it through 12-0, maybe 11-1.
I mean, they might not make it through the weekend unbeaten.
They might not make it through the weekend. They've got a big one this weekend against Georgia.
Yeah.
And they close out the year against Texas A&M. It's basically a 2-game schedule the rest of the way, as I look at the schedule.
Okay.
So I think Texas is in. I think they win the conference. I do think Texas beats Georgia this weekend, but I think Georgia finishes out its season 10-2.
Okay.
And at that point, this is why the SEC is the most interesting conference with respect to the playoff, by the way. Mm-hmm. At that point, you're basically comparing losses, because you'd have Georgia with 2 losses on the road against Bama and Texas. I think as compared to some other teams that I might talk about as also being part of this conversation, they make it through with that.
Okay.
They make it through with that. I think they give Tennessee a third loss later in the year. I think they officially knock them out of the conversation. I think the body of work, all things considered, provided they're not getting blown out against Texas, I think they would get the grace and they would be through into the playoffs. So Georgia's my second SEC team that gets in.
It's a tough November 1-2, though, with Ole Miss and Tennessee. It's tough.
It's tough. It is tough. But I still have a fair amount of faith in Georgia. I would add the possibility does exist that this weekend's game between Alabama and Tennessee is a playoff elimination game.
Probably.
And I favor Bama in the matchup. I think there's a good chance they win this game. They win out. I think they finish 11-1. So I've got Bama as my third team going to the playoff.
Do you really think they're going to finish 11-1?
I do.
All they're doing is playing down to everybody.
I know. But that's true about a bunch of teams in the SEC. It's not just Bama.
I know, but what is there like right in this moment to like love about Alabama? They used to have Nick Saban.
Jalen Milroe.
I know.
Jalen Milroe. That's about it.
At Tennessee, Mizzou, at LSU, Auburn's always going to be weird.
That Auburn game could be real weird. Yeah. That Auburn game could be super weird. I looked at that one.
Yeah.
But as I look across this calendar, I'm the calendar of games and the schedule in front of them, I favor Bama. So Bama's my third team. And then we're looking around. All right, where's the fourth team coming from? Ole Miss already has 2 losses. I don't have faith that this team is suddenly going to be the one that beats Georgia, right? I've got them down for 3 losses. I think they're out. I think they're already out. I think Mizzou's got another loss in them, probably to Bama, maybe to South Carolina. I'm not as high on Mizzou. I think the game next weekend between A&M and LSU decides who that last team is from the SEC getting into the playoff. Actually, it could quasi-clinch a playoff spot for A&M if you're of the mind that they can beat South Carolina and Auburn. Both on the road, tough spots.
I am of that mind, but yes.
I like the way they're playing right now. They got Connor Wigman back. It's a big deal.
And it's a nice bye timing for A&M, too, this past
Really
week.
nice bye timing. So bear in mind, they lost to Notre Dame to start the season. They've got this LSU game coming up, which I think is a big deal. They close out the year at home against Texas.
Huge.
I think they lose that game. Final game of the year against Texas. But I think because it would only be their first SEC conference loss and because of the 4 tiebreakers that I went through, they would then play Texas another week in a row for the SEC title game. So in this scenario, it would be a rematch because A&M would have, if you go all the way through this thing, I think it would come down to the winning percentage of common opponents or winning percentage of, I figured this whole thing out. Basically,
I'm sure.
The Bama loss would leave, or the Bama loss to Vanderbilt would leave them out of the SEC title game.
Okay.
So in that scenario, I've got Texas winning. I've got A&M finishing 10-3. I've got Bama and Georgia getting in. And I've got A&M kind of as the 12 seed because I think the committee's going to want to make a statement about 3 lost teams getting in. But I've got 4 teams getting in.
Here's what I think you are too positive about. I think we're going to have a cacophony, a murder, whatever animal group name you want to say, of 9-3 teams at the end of the season.
It's possible. I just think, but they'd be 10-3
with expansion, with higher floors of mid-tier teams, either because of like having older COVID year players or, adding depth through the portal or, having Diego Pavia on your team. I think you are assuming a little bit too much of all of these teams with either new coaches or new quarterbacks or new schedule types that like,
yeah,
I think you're too high on business right now and teams taking care of it.
Those are my 4 from the SEC, and then I've got Iowa State out of the Big 12.
Okay.
I don't think 2 teams from the Big 12 are making it this year. I also think the Big 12 is going to be the most fun to watch in the back half of November because that's when we'll figure out who's making this title game. Right now, there's a lot of talk about Iowa State and BYU because they're both unbeaten.
Of course.
They both seem to be getting better. Texas Tech, I would also add, is still unbeaten.
In conference.
They lost to Wazoo,
yeah.
I think 1 conference loss is good enough to get somebody in the title game. Right now, K-State, Cincinnati, Colorado, West Virginia, Texas Tech has no losses, West Virginia, ASU, a bunch of teams have one loss. So they're still in it, technically speaking. Colorado, interesting to consider. Who knows with that offense? Utah, a team that I expected to be there. Already 2 conference losses. We heard the deal about Cam Rising. I think they're pretty much going out here. They would need to maybe be a spoiler in this conversation, as they have both BYU and Iowa State at home in November, but I don't think they're a contender at this point. K-State could win out. K-State wins out. This is a team that could potentially get to that title game, but I don't see them buttoned up enough on offense to get there. I still think it's Iowa State. Neutral field, they'd be about a 3.5-point favorite over BYU per the numbers I saw. And I trust them more on offense and on defense. I just think they're a more complete team. It is getting harder to doubt BYU. It feels like they are also improving. They're +7 in turnover margin. They're intercepting passes like crazy. But Iowa State is sort of my vibe right now.
I think you're right in that November is going to present a number of everybody eating each other in the Big 12 moments. And I just think we're going to get to like the 9th tiebreaker in the Big 12. It's going to come down to a spelling bee between BYU and Kansas State.
It's entirely possible. And then my G5 team's Boise. And I would love nothing more than for Army or Navy to get in. I think that'd be fun. But I think Boise's going to win out. I think the close loss to Oregon looks better every week.
Sure.
I don't see the committee leaving him out, especially if it's a deal where Ashton Ginty is going to break Barry Sanders' 1988 rushing record. He's going to be a Heisman finalist. They're not going to leave him out. Are you kidding me?
I mean, there are opportunities for teams elsewhere to go undefeated.
I just think Boise gets
13 and 0.
I think Boise gets in.
Okay.
If Boise wins out, they're in.
And they're a name, yeah.
So here's how this sets up then.
Okay. Walk me through it.
Number 9, Georgia, on the road at Notre Dame in round 1, with the winner playing Texas.
Okay.
Number 12, Texas A&M, on the road at your Oregon Ducks, with the winner playing Iowa State.
Okay.
As I flash up this bracket on our video. I've got number 10, Miami, on the road at Alabama.
Okay.
Crazy matchup, by the way.
Yeah.
Winner playing Ohio State. And then I've got Boise on the road at Penn State, with the winner playing Clemson.
Okay.
I'm not making picks further than this, but to the question that we got on verballers.com from Daniel, this is the way that I think the bracket shakes out.
So per your bracket, we could have January outdoor games in Northern Indiana, Ohio, Boise, which is real. If anybody's ever seen, what was it, the old Humanitarian Bowl and the famous Idaho Potato Bowl?
Yep.
It's a lot of snow.
Not in Ohio, not in Ohio. Oregon. We've got Notre Dame. We've got Oregon.
I'm saying we could have second round games.
Oh, yeah.
Second round games in Northern Indiana. I guess not. That game would have to be in Austin.
These are bowl games. These are bowl games, Dan. The second round.
Oh, they're bowl games. You're right. Let's say first round games would be Northern Indiana, Eugene, Oregon, State College, Pennsylvania. 3 of the 4 would be cold weather first rounds in your bracket. Okay. That's December 20th-ish.
That's my pick.
That's not bad. This would make for an entertaining group of games.
It would be entertaining, if nothing more. I did the best I could to try and go through tiebreaker scenarios and whatnot. But I do.
You know what this actually makes me feel?
Yeah.
This is my hipster take. You ready for my hipster take? It actually makes me feel like the second tier of all of these conferences is secretly more entertaining than the top.
Totally. Because
there's so much room for flawed quality, which hopefully that's what people feel about this show. And flawed quality, wild card, spoilers. It's great.
And also that top tier is so poorly defined in most conferences.
Yeah.
It really is poorly defined. And that's why I say the Big Ten is maybe the least interesting of all of these, because I feel like I know who the 3 teams are right now.
Right.
It could change, upsets happen, all that. But outside of that, truly, Big 12, ACC kind of all over the place. SEC, we generally think Texas is the best team, but there are obviously going to be a number of teams. Georgia can knock them off this weekend.
Can I give you a homework assignment?
Please.
It's not due until next week's Tuesday show. I want you to find the machete teams. I want you to find the teams who play the most teams that are in the thick of it.
Yeah.
At the top of my head is who are the machete teams? Kind of Virginia, Arizona State, Vanderbilt, and Illinois.
Oh, Virginia's definitely one. I mean, I mentioned Utah. Utah's got the opportunity to play spoiler here with BYU and Iowa State.
Yeah,
later
who's hacking through the thickets?
Yeah.
That's
so
right
in.
Yeah.
Go and watch the video if you have yet to do so. I've got the bracket up there, but I did my best to talk through it.
Yes.
Real quick, before we let the fine people go, Dan, let's take a look at some of the weekday games. If we have any thoughts on those.
Early bird special.
So there are a couple games here that I pulled out. Boston College at Virginia Tech on Thursday night. Virginia Tech currently favored by 7. Your Oregon Ducks, minus about 4 touchdowns on the road at Purdue on Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern.
I thought about going, but it's going to be too much of a stretch, and I'm too old.
Friday night, 10:15 is the game I'm most interested in. That's Oklahoma State coming off a bye on the road at BYU. BYU favored by 9 points. We also have some other Friday games. Got FSU at Duke. Duke favored by 3. Got Fresno at Nevada. Nevada
Choate
is
hold.
the Choate hold. They're a 3-point home dog, which could be interesting for Fresno. What are your thoughts in that Oklahoma State BYU game and the Oregon Purdue game for what it's worth?
My thought is that you saying you're interested in that, I'm going to put you at 1.2 quarters worth before you pass out and watch the rest of it, the balance of that game Saturday morning. I gave sort of my thoughts on Purdue, Oregon. That situationally, it's a nice spot to be a screw it team, as Purdue is and doesn't have a defense. I think Oregon should win that game. Not a spoil, but kind of pre-scared about Purdue, Oregon. And I don't know how to explain it.
Okay.
Beyond Purdue just does not care, and it might be Ryan Walters' final season in West Lafayette, and I don't know, let down and go to West Lafayette seems dicey to me. Florida State Duke, I hope for whatever sake that Brock Glenn is fun and entertaining and gives Florida State fans something to be hopeful about for the future. What did you say, Nevada Fresno?
Nevada Fresno, yeah.
These are all fun. These are all super watchable, entertaining matchups.
The BYU game to me is interesting. I don't really know the state of the quarterback situation at Oklahoma State.
Okay.
At time of recording. Alan Bowman's been benched twice. It seemed as if Garrett Rangel looked better in his most recent action. It would not surprise me if he is the dude, but there's just been a lot of issues with this Oklahoma State team that we didn't really foresee. Again, this is a team that had a ton of returning production, a schedule that's seemingly set up well.
Right.
They have had trouble running the football. Alan Bowman has not been good enough to shoulder the load on his own. They've had basic issues with tackling, Dan. I read our friend Scott Wright at the Oklahoman just to see what he was saying. He talks a lot about just tackling has been bad with this Oklahoma State team. So again, I have skepticism with BYU, but BYU's been solid.
Winning is a skill, Ty.
They've been solid. And just because they don't jump off the page at you with any kind of fantastical statistical prowess, winning is a skill. And I feel like they've gotten better through the air. They're still not a very good running team, but Jake Retzlaff has been good as a passer the last couple weeks running. I'm almost inclined to lay the points. I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm still going to go Oklahoma State because I have it in the back of my head what happened in K-State a year ago when they played against Oklahoma State coming off a bye. And it seemed as if they were able to take advantage, Oklahoma State was, of that bye week and make some changes. And from that point forward, it was off to the races. So I'm going to take the points, but I think BYU wins.
Okay, fair enough. And you know how they say quarterbacks who are these folk hero types, they'll never pay for a drink in this town again?
Yeah.
Alan Bowman will pay full price for drinks in Stillwater. They'll be happy to see him. Hey, man, thanks for all the efforts with Oklahoma State. That's actually going to be a $12 cocktail. He will pay for drinks.
All right. So for the week ahead, we got Big Ten Breakfast coming up on Friday morning. We post every Friday morning at 9 a.m. out on our YouTube channel. We post it a bunch of places. You'll see Big Ten breakfast if that's something you're into. We've got the big old Week 8 recap episode Saturday night live at midnight. And before all of that, we've got our Week 8 preview episode, which drops to the feed on Thursday. We've got a very interesting week of games in front of us. Nebraska, Indiana, Miami, Louisville in the early block. We've got Alabama, Tennessee, and Notre Dame, Georgia Tech in the afternoon block. And we've got LSU, Arkansas, as we mentioned before. We've got Georgia, Texas in the evening block. There are a bunch of other big games. It will be difficult for you and I to just narrow it down to a select few, but we are going to get working on that pretty much the second we hit stop here.
And I'm excited for you to make a John Tenuta video with Notre Dame, Georgia Tech coming up. There's a tease of all the upcoming content.
That's on my list, yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, we've got a deep cut coming on the Notre
I
Dame.
remind you, we have a call about like what is the history? Is there something interesting talking point wise with some of these matchups? And you had fully blocked out.
I blacked
the
out.
2007, I think it was 2007, 2006, 2007 Georgia Tech Notre Dame situation. I had to remind you of it. Yeah,
I blacked out. Yeah, I memory hold that one.
You suppressed traumatic memories. Yeah,
just brutal. Brutal. Bunch of games to discuss here. Encourage everybody to go on out to verballers.com to sign up to support what we're doing, but also get in on the action. Don't want to give too much away. We are giving away a gigantic prize this week.
Ooh.
As part of the Pick'em game.
Oh, you got to join then now.
This is like once a month we save up enough money where we can give out a big time prize. And this is going to be a choose your own adventure prize of sorts. Wow. I will detail that on Thursday. But get in now, verballers.com. That's how you can join play Run the Board. That's all I got.
Same.
Dan Rubenstein, keep nursing that voice. We need it back to full strength.
I have the tea. Look at this. It's in a solid verbal mug. I've got coffee in a newer solid verbal mug.
Okay.
Shop.solidverbal.com. That's the right URL, yes?
Yep. Merch.solidverbal.
Merch.solidverbal.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just ordered a new case of Throat Comfort tea. So I'm juicing, Ty. I'm doing everything I can.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks for downloading, for listening, for playing along at home. Write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Let us know where we're right, where we're wrong. Would love to hear from you. In the meantime, as always, stay solid.
Peace.